Welcome into CyHawk Talk here on a Thursday, no Sunday rewind show. Some of us, 50% of us were unavailable to record on Sunday, something about spending time with family. I don't know about that. I just lock myself in this office and talk about the Hawkeyes 24/7, write stories. So apparently, I have a daughter now. I was completely unaware of this fact until recently, because I'm just locked in this room. You can see I have the bed behind me, and that's all I do. Anyway, talking about Iowa State football, season's wrapped up. Regular season's wrapped up last week with wins, notable wins, as both teams kind of got into position for 9-win seasons, barring bowl games, bowl wins. And we'd like to take this opportunity to look back on our bold predictions that we made in August as we were, the excitement was swirling for a 2025 college football season. I did fantastic on my bold predictions, going a whopping 0 for 3. And we'll go ahead and round out this first segment with somebody who did a little bit better with their bold predictions, though bold is questionable with Ben's predictions. Maybe just, mild predictions from Ben. But number one, my top bold prediction was Mark Gronowski will throw for 3,000 yards. Ben, do you think I got this one right?
I do not think you got that one right.
Yes, unfortunately, the South Dakota State transfer quarterback was not the key to unlocking the passing offense. I'll get into a little bit more historical context to this passing attack in the next segment. We're going to do grades, but Gronowski sitting at 1,529 yards on the season. He has appeared in all 12 games, started all 12 games, and just the passing game was never quite there this season for the Hawkeyes, which moves us into our number two bold prediction that I got wrong. And these two were like totally contingent on one another. I thought, clearly if Gronowski throws for 3,000 yards, there will be a 1,000-yard receiver as well. Well, this one was probably the worst. I was at least, Gronowski got 50% of the way to 3,000. DJ Vanami did not get even 30% of the way there, as I was leading receiver with 288 yards on the season. Kamari Moulton got a little bit closer to that 1,000-yard rusher prediction that I also made, and he got to 783. I feel like he would have gotten there if he hadn't got hurt in the first game of the season. So he missed the majority of the first game, misses the Iowa State game, and then misses that UMass game and comes back against Rutgers. I feel like he probably could have eked out 120 yards spread across the 11 quarters of football he missed this year. I feel pretty confident that that one would have been right. And then I guess I could have kind of claimed that I got one of my, six bold predictions, because they were kind of two of my predictions were parlays. If you like to gamble, they were kind of parlays. But didn't get anyone right on that one. And then rounding it out, Hawkeyes will go 2-1 against 2024 college football playoff teams in 2025. Iowa went one of two, lost to Indiana, and Oregon beat Penn State. As I said at the time, I thought the Indiana one was going to be the easiest of those three wins, and quite frankly, they should have probably gone 3-0 in those games, and that would have put Iowa in position to be a 2025 playoff team. Unfortunately, quite literally two plays didn't go Iowa's way this year, and they end up 1-2 in those games, and that just kind of shows you the razor thin margins for the Hawkeyes this year. Reflecting on my bold predictions, I think I probably uh, felt I felt really confident in them. I wanted to be bold, as is the word bold in those predictions, and I feel like that's kind of if everything had gone right for Iowa this year, I think that is kind of what the season would have looked like. Unfortunately, that's not the way that they went. I think I got to kind of the heart of some of the things that did happen this year in terms of the positive feelings around the program with my bold predictions. And you'd be feeling really good about the direction of the program had all those come true. Ben, as we're reflecting back on our bold predictions, when I shared these bold predictions at the beginning of the season with you, or when you read the story for the first time, what were your thoughts? Did you feel like I was going to get any of these right, or did you have a feeling I was going to end up 0 for 3 like I did?
Well, I must point out, Ethan, you're not dead yet. Mark Gronowski could always pass for 1,471 yards in the bowl game, with about 712 of those going to DJ. So we can't count out two of those predictions yet.
And I guess, maybe they'll get a team that was in the playoffs last year in their bowl game, and then I might have a shot at that those two wins that I thought were gonna happen, right? Uh, but no, I swung for the fences, and we'll review the tape. Maybe we'll be a little bit more mild next year with our bold predictions, but I didn't really like that. I think that you need to go, you need to shoot for the moon when you're making bold predictions, because then you end up looking like a genius when a team like Indiana
Hmm.
makes the 2024 college football playoff. But Ben, I'll turn it over to you. I've done plenty of talking already. Just go ahead and tell us how smart you are for the next 5 or so minutes.
Ethan, you know how much I hate to tell you I was right. Is that how that goes? I think I was somewhat close, but my bold predictions were maybe a little less bold than yours. I will say, reflecting on yours, the 3-0 or the three wins against playoff teams, I thought there's no chance, Ethan.
It
And
was two
as you,
wins, two wins. I
uh,
gave him one loss. I
two
gave him one
wins.
loss.
And as you hinted at, Iowa was a lot closer in those games than, their record would indicate. So props to you. I think you were so close to nailing that. That was the prediction that I thought there's no way, Ethan. So that was close, but unfortunately in this game, close doesn't count. My three predictions, the first one was actually not correct, but I ended up feeling okay about it. My bold prediction preseason was a tight end will lead Iowa State in receiving yards for the first time since 2010. And I was close. Brett Eskelson ended up leading Iowa State with 526 receiving yards. Chase Sowell had 500 yards. And then the first tight end on the board is Benjamin Bramer at 446. Um, so I ended up not hitting on the yardage portion of that, but Bramer led Iowa State with 37 receptions. So maybe I should have been less vague and included a loophole in my preseason pick of some sort of a way to get that one right. But Benjamin Bramer leads Iowa State in receptions, but not yardage. My next bold prediction that I made preseason is Matt Campbell gets his first CyHawk winning streak at home. And of course, Iowa State was a favorite, I believe, in that CyHawk game. So maybe not super bold, but when you think about how Matt Campbell had never won that game at home and he'd never beaten Iowa in back-to-back years, I thought there was maybe a little bit of historical newness for that, and there was no precedent for that. So Matt Campbell was able to do both of those things with that win against Iowa on that Kyle Conradi field goal. And my last prediction was a uniform prediction. The all black uniforms only come out once or twice. I don't know why I felt this way preseason, but Iowa State, with one game to go, has only worn its all black uniforms one time against BYU, and they surprised everybody when they did it. I was kind of following that whole uniform story this season. What I did not see coming was the reintroduction of gold two times. The Cyclones wear the gold pants. And they also break out the Cyanado logo helmet. So a couple uniform takes I did not see coming. But the black kind of being pushed back deeper into the closet was something I thought we might see.
You said it tongue in cheek about Gronowski potentially throwing for 1,400 yards in the bowl game and still being able to get that one right. I guess, if we're being fair, you could still get your tight end prediction right in the bowl game. So, that's you were a lot closer in getting that one right than I was in getting my playoff one right, because I was 2 plays away from getting that one right. You're only one big play away from getting your second prediction right. And maybe next year, instead of saying receiving yards, we just say leading receiver. And then you
There you
can
go.
just go like, yeah, I totally meant receptions and not yards, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about how we're going to do this next year. But, if we're going to analyze that one a little bit, I think I was right in kind of predicting that there was not going to be a breakout receiver. Chase Sowell, at no point in a 3 or 4 game stretch did he take over this offense. Same with Eskelson. Same with, Jackson. All these guys who broke out, we thought for certain points were never able to sustain it. And the only two guys it felt like who Iowa State kind of had some consistency from in the passing game were the two tight ends, Burkle, who was fourth in yards, and Benjamin Bramer, who was third.
Maybe if Brett Eskildson was as tough as his younger brother, he could have had a couple more yards.
Tough. Another Eskilson brother in the fold. Matt Campbell was already stirring the pot in his signing day press conference. He said he loves it when brothers on the team because he likes to stir the pot.
If you were to evaluate, which of these three did you feel least confident in when you made it?
Hmm. Probably, probably the tight end yardage because this game has changed so much from 2010. And in 2010, if I'm remembering right, Iowa State's offense was pretty abysmal. That's why a tight end ends up leading the team in yardage. That's not supposed to function. You don't want that. You don't want a tight end to lead your team in receiving yardage. And Brady Quinn told me that the week of the CyHawk game. They're going to need somebody to step up. So I thought Iowa State's offense was going to be much better this season. I thought Rocco Becht would make an appearance on the Big 12, all team mentions today. And I don't think he did, Ethan. This Iowa State offense was much worse and much more disappointing than I thought it was going to be. So I think that's why I wasn't so confident in making that pick because I thought Iowa State's offense was going to be great. And I thought there was going to be more of that production on the outside, with one of these transfer receivers that never materialized.
Yeah, I feel like the breakout wide receiver is something that Iowa State was kind of chasing all season. Every once in a while, one of them would have a game where it's like, oh, is it him? Is it him? Kind of in the same way that Iowa's been chasing that quarterback that unlocks the passing attack, and at this point they're at the point where it's like, well, maybe it's a receiver that we need to unlock the passing attack. I saw that some people were upset about the tallest receiver in the recruiting class being 6'1", and you can't just go find Calvin Johnson in every recruiting class. You're just not going to be a 6'5", 225-pound guy who's running 4.4 in every recruiting class. And I think it would be a tough sell to get that guy to come to Iowa with the way the passing attack is going currently, because I have to imagine that guy would be a 5-star and he'd probably be from the South, so the SEC would be all over that. When you presented your takeaways, since I asked you the same question after mine, I would say that I thought, these are all pretty possible, plausible. And I thought that probably the tight end one was going to be the one that was your undoing. So, clearly you got your finger on the pulse, and I thought you actually, in what we talked about, off camera, off script, for your predictions for this season, your expectations for this season, I feel like you were mostly right about the way that the season played out for the Cyclones. Do you feel like, I know later you have maybe the fan expectations weren't met, but were your expectations met for this season?
I think they were. My preseason expectations was that Iowa State was going to go under its Vegas total of 7.5 wins because of, I feel like I'm a broken record. They were 5-1 in one-score games last season, and I didn't expect that to repeat. And we saw maybe a little bit of Iowa State coming back down to the mean. I think my expectations changed. If you would have asked me that question after the 5-0 start, I would have said, hey, they are no longer going to go under 7 wins. But overall, predicting kind of a back to the mean, back to the norm season for Iowa State was, I think, the accurate take for how this season has gone. But that also says a lot about where this team is, where maybe the average, the mean, the expectation is you're knocking on the door of another 9-win season, which would be the first back-to-back 9-win season in program history. So it says a lot about Iowa State's program that this is kind of the floor. This is kind of a little bit of a disappointing season.
I think it's kind of similar takeaway. I think Iowa met my expectations. I think that for the most part, the record maybe doesn't indicate how good of a team they were. I thought that they could potentially have been as good as a 10-win team, and I thought that they couldn't do any worse than 8 wins. I think I probably told that to my family as we were getting ready for the season. They were keenly interested in how good the Hawkeyes were going to be, considering I come from a family of Nebraska fans. They wanted to know what that Black Friday game was going to look like, and I certainly didn't nail my prediction for that one, thinking it was going to be a close game that Iowa pulled out. But for the most part, the Hawkeyes were who I thought they were going to be going into the season, and were maybe 1 or 2 plays away from being a college football playoff team. But we'll go ahead and kind of get our final thoughts on the season with our season-long grades right after this. Back here on CyHawk Talk on a Thursday, talking season-long grades for Iowa and Iowa State. I'll go ahead and lead us off with my first grade, and that's going to be passing offense. I'm going to give the passing offense a D plus. I mentioned I was going to provide a little bit of historical context on just how bad the passing game is, and right now, Mark Gronowski needs 13 passing yards in the bowl game, or Iowa needs 13 passing yards in the bowl game to avoid having a season worse than the Deacon Hill season at Iowa. And right now, it's the worst passing offense Iowa's ever had since 1982 when Chuck Long was a sophomore at Iowa. So it's been pretty bad, just never seemed to get the right rhythm. I gave him a D plus instead of maybe a D, D minus, or an F, simply because there were times when the passing game did click and they made the plays that they needed to win games. I'm thinking about the Michigan State game late when it had been atrocious all day, and then they get the plays that they need. I think about the Reese Vanderzee crazy catch against Nebraska, or the DJ Vanami catch and run touchdown against the Huskers. The Rutgers game, the Dayton Howard catch, where he makes that 40-yard catch to set up a touchdown. That was really instrumental. So there were games where it looked like they were competent, they were going to be able to pass the ball well going into the future, and then just the injury threw things, the Mark Gronowski injury threw things, threw a wrench in things, and it just didn't end up working out. But for the most part, there were times, there were flashes where it looked competent. So it's going to be a D plus. Moving on to number two, big game success. This one is going to get an F. You think about, you lose to Iowa State in a one-score game, like, gee, that would have been a big win early in the season. You lose to Indiana by one score. You had that game in your hands. You should have won that game probably if Hank Brown is just able to hit Kamari Moulton on a halfback screen pass. And then you look at the Oregon game where you have the special teams miscues early. You end up giving up a safety, and you lose by 2 points in a game where you go ahead in the final 2 minutes of the game, and a perfect pass beats you down the sidelines to set up a game-winning field goal. And so big game success is an F. I feel like every what-if scenario for the Hawkeyes broke against them this year, and so you feel like they were a much better team than the record ultimately shows. A lot of people bellyaching on Tuesday and since Tuesday about their spot at number 23 in the college football playoff committee ranking because of the resume kind of seems like it's lacking a little bit. They end up with the same record as Iowa State, but higher than Iowa State because they just felt like a better team, and the Cyclones had that big 4-game losing streak. So probably felt like a better team than it was, and they just couldn't seal the deal in big games and couldn't have that success in big games. That's why they get an F there. And then because it was a pretty good team, and I'm speaking positively about them, I didn't want all my grades to be negative. But program trajectory, they didn't take a step forward this year. I think they just kind of treaded water this year in terms of what they were able to do. I think expectations will be fairly similar as they were going into this season, but that's not saying much when you're a team that expects to be contending in the Big Ten and expects to be getting close to a college football playoff bid every year. So you can only move up so much. Basically from here you become a perennial, Big Ten champion like pick and a national championship contender. That's like the only tier Iowa needs to get to beyond this. But I'm going to give program trajectory a B. You feel like you saw positive signs from the offense, maybe didn't materialize in stats or production, but you feel like you saw positive signs from the offense, and things seem to be headed in the right direction there. The defense, despite losing all Americans and plenty of long-term starters, was able to replicate its success and be a solid unit. So you feel pretty good about the defense's ability to continually reload and not necessarily regress and continue to be one of those top tier units. So you feel pretty good about the program moving forward. I wouldn't go as far as to say that this season was a definitive success. I know there was plenty of discussion about definitive success, labeling this season as such following the Nebraska game. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but I certainly think that you feel like the program's momentum is headed the right direction. So program trajectory is going to be a B. Ben, go ahead and take us away on Iowa State's season-long grades.
Iowa State gets a C for fulfilling expectations. And we've been talking about this dynamic, this show, and pretty much all season long here on CyHawk Talk, Ethan, where the expectations changed 5 games into the season. But overall, you look at a C and nobody's happy with a C. At least you don't want to be happy with the C, but it's also not a flunk. You didn't completely bomb and completely have something that just went totally south. So I'm going to give Iowa State a C. Rocco Becht had something interesting to say after the Oklahoma State game. He said, you know, if you talk to the media, if you look at it, people are saying it feels like we've won 5 games because it kind of does. But in reality, the Cyclones are potentially going to win 9 games for just the 5th time in program history. So a mixed bag equals a C on fulfilling expectations. And part of the disappointment comes because Iowa State destroyed its rivals. They took care of business against Iowa, Kansas State, and Kansas, Ethan. It wasn't a destroying on the scoreboard, but they destroyed the hopes with the legendary, kick from Kyle Kenrardy to do it in the same way as they did a year ago. I mean, you really just kind of stuck it to your rivals. So I'm giving Iowa State an A for sticking it to the rivals. They beat Kansas State in Dublin, perhaps kicking off the Chris Climate retirement, shoo him out of the door tour. So hats off to the Cyclones for taking care of business against the rivals. And this new look offense, it earns a D. There were so much expectations behind bringing back a junior Rocco Becht. You bring back both running backs. Your tight ends are all brought back. They're amazing. And you really think about the big piece was, can you replace Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll? And I think if we're going to talk about definitive answers, that answer is an absolute no. Iowa State did not replace those guys in the transfer portal or with, the Eskildsons of the world who were already on the roster. It's really tough. That's a tall ask to replace NFL guys like that. And the Cyclones did not get it done. The offense had games where it looked terrible. I mean, that's the only way to put it. So this Iowa State new look offense gets a D. They were able to run the ball pretty much as well as they have throughout the entire season, but the rest of the offense was so inconsistent that it held everything back.
Who knows? Maybe next week we'll find out that Iowa State's playing Nebraska in a bowl game and they can go 4-0 against rivals this year.
There we go.
Make it another stick it to another rival. That's a growing up as a Nebraska fan, that was a rivalry I was completely unaware of because the Cyclones stunk my entire childhood. But it's an incredibly hotly contested rivalry on social media now. So I mean, it could be a fun bowl matchup, and that's kind of what you have bowls for, right?
That's my opinion. As these bowls become more and more glorified practices and more about 2026, the next season, let's add stakes any way we can. Let's get some rivals paired up. Nobody's listened to my idea for a CyHawk rematch out there in Arizona. Why not make that happen?
I think it would be a well viewed game, and I think it would be interesting to see now that Iowa's kind of figured out how to move the ball with Mark Gronowski at quarterback, what might be different. Kamari Moulton's back, as I mentioned, he missed that game. It could be certainly an interesting game, and the injury situation has certainly gone against the Cyclones. I don't know where they're at with their injuries and getting those guys back for the bowl game, but it certainly would be interesting to see them meet on a neutral field again this year. I'm just disappointed we're not getting the 13th game in Hawaii between Vanderbilt and Miami. That would be an all-time crazy thing to tell your kids about. Like, hey, there was this one time where Vanderbilt and Miami played in Hawaii to get an extra game on their season to make the college football playoff when it was just 12 teams. Because I'm sure by the time I'm able to recollect with my children, the college football playoff will be significantly expanded beyond 12 teams.
Yeah, it'll be a 64 team with 14 play in, just like the basketball tournament, I'm sure.
Yeah, Montana, and Montana State will be playing a play-in to get into the college football playoff because there'll be FBS teams and cats and dogs living together. Complete chaos.
I'm here for it. No,
I
I'm
would be
not.
I would be excited for it. It would be the most ridiculous thing ever, but I think it would be better than the current format, which I have my issues with. But that's not what this show's for. Thank you for watching. CyHawk Talk will be back. Once we get bowl destinations figured out, we'll be chatting about those are the previews for those. We didn't do a basketball show last year. We'll see if we can figure out a format that allows us to get a podcast out during basketball season. Plenty to discuss for the Cyclones and the men's basketball team, which is right there competing. Iowa interesting with their new head coach, and the women's basketball teams both look like it could be a top 10 matchup between the women's basketball teams next week. So that'll be fun to follow as well. But thanks for watching this episode of CyHawk Talk on a Thursday.